Hey everyone, I'm finally back after going to South Carolina and visiting the new grandson as well as their parents. And we had a great time when we were out there and got to hold that precious little boy. And if you look over my shoulder here, you might see a few of the pictures hanging up there in my office. If you need to see any more, please let me or Ruth know. We'll be happy to show you those. Hey, we are in the unit called Overcome, Living Beyond Your Circumstances. And we are in the third week looking at Joseph's life out of the Old Testament. We'll be looking in Genesis 39 and 40. And the title of this week's lesson is called Overcome Being Forgotten. In our church office, our secretary has in one of her drawers a bunch of lost and found items. Many of these items have been there for years. And we have jewelry, there's car keys, there's toys, clothing, things that have been left behind that we have found and put them in the lost and found. And it's sad because people have forgotten either that they had these items or that where they had them last, and it's at our church. It's funny to find Bibles that are well used and don't have names in them, and we don't know who they belong to. So if you're missing anything, you might let the church office know. We might be able to help you out with that. You know, many in your class may feel that God has put them in a lost and found drawer, closed the drawer, locked it, and thrown away the key because they feel so isolated and feel so alone, like God has forgotten them. And the point of this lesson I'd like for you to get across to the class is it doesn't matter how you feel, that God is with you. You know, that's not the case. It's not the case that God's forgotten us at all. We'd like to take that lesson from Joseph's life and get some encouragement from that. If the people in your class have been in church any amount of time, they've probably heard sermons and Sunday school lessons on Joseph. They've heard the stories of the brothers throwing him into the cistern and Potiphar's wife and that story that we had last week. And they've probably heard the stories now that we're going to have this week about how he went to prison and kind of went up in the ranks there and was interpreting dreams, and how the cupbearer, once he got back in the king's favor, how the cupbearer forgot his promise to Joseph. What I don't want us to do in this week's lesson is to gloss over the stories. Sometimes we can do that when those stories are very familiar to us, when they're familiar to us as the teacher. Sometimes we forget the people in our class may not have heard them or may not know all the details that we happen to know, or maybe other people in the class know. So remember that and try to tell the story afresh. The natural tendency for us when we feel forgotten and we feel alone and isolated is to sulk and to nurse those hurts, nurse those pains. But let's take our example from Joseph, who had a lot of bad things happen to him, and he continued to do what's right. Even when he was in prison, even when it looks like he was forgotten about by the outside world, he continued to do what's right. And that showed his character. Stressful situations will reveal our character. And God will reward us, whether it's in this life and or the next life, when we keep doing what we're supposed to do, what He's gifted us to do, and our character remains strong, God will reward us. And we see that in Joseph's life. So whether we feel like it or not, we can feel like we're on that deserted island and God is nowhere to be found. We need to remember that God is with us. It doesn't matter if all of our friends and family have forsaken us and it looks like the world's turned against us. That may be the case, but God is still with us. We see that in the life of Joseph, and let's look at a couple of the just partial portions of the verses that's in our text. In Genesis 39, the first part of 21, it says, the Lord was with him. Just comes right out and says that. The Lord was with him and showed him kindness and granted favor to him. And then down on in the last part of verse 23, it says, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. So let's try to get that across to the class this week, is that regardless of how we feel, God is with us. And so that'll be a point that we can help in overcoming being forgotten. When we feel like everybody else has disowned us or whatever, God is still with us, and to keep our character strong. Let me tell you a couple of other things before we close today. I was teaching a class on Sunday nights called Teach Like Jesus, and that was only a 3-week class, so if you missed out on that, I'm sorry, but we had a good time, I think, in discussing some of the aspects of how Jesus taught and how we can bring that into our Sunday school lessons. Let me also remind you to set your clocks back. I know most of us now have cell phones that automatically do that, and that's how we wake up. But let's remember that we get that extra hour of sleep this week that we lost back in the spring. So I hope you're having a great week. I hope you have a great lesson. And once again, if you need to see some more pictures of that baby, just let me know. Hope to see you Sunday. Bye.